That's where the original mayor's office was. The mayor's office was on the first floor of the 5th Street side, and they built this beautiful building to be the city hall and the county courthouse. It's up there, the courthouse. So this was the city and the county combined when they built this. And the post office said, well, where's the mayor's office? And they said, well, it's back there. And they said, well, that's the number 1 address. And so even though they opened up the rotunda here, they said that will be your address. So clearly this is the front. You wouldn't make this your back door entry. It's beautiful. It's 5-story rotunda filled with symbolism. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the symbolism in the building here before we go up to the council chamber. I have a cheat sheet. Forgive me if I have to refer to it. There's a lot of information about this building. Construction started in the late 1800s. Prior to this building being built, there was a city hall and there was a county courthouse. The county courthouse was sort of located over where MIA, the Museum of Art, was located in that area. The city hall was located over here at Nicollet and Hennepin at the intersection. It was a French building with the French mansard roof, if you will. The city hall was on the lower levels, and the Star Tribune was on the top floor of the city hall, which is why to this day, if you look at 673, that's both city government and Star Tribune. So we always have to be careful. You might think it's an internal department calling you 673. It could be the Star Tribune, right? So we still share that PBX from all that long time ago when the Star Tribune was in the city hall attic. But the city hall building was a fire trap. It was poorly built and was always in danger of being burned. And the county courthouse was a great big heavy stone that was sinking in a marsh. And so the county commissioners and the city council and mayor got together and said, well, we will build a building together, something that will be venerated for the centuries to come, that holds both our city and county governments. And this is the result. However, in a long tradition of Minneapolis and Hennepin County not being able to do things well together, they went to the state legislature and said, we think you should create, by special law, a separate third legal entity that owns the building. We don't want the city or the county to own it. We want somebody independent. And they created what is today called the Municipal Building Commission, or the MBC. And the MBC owns this building. So the city does not own City Hall. The county commissioners do not own the courthouse, which was what this building was originally. It's owned by MBC. MBC has 4 members that are a governing body. The chair of the Board of County Commissioners is the chair of the MBC. The mayor is the vice chair of the MBC. The city council picks one of their members to represent their interests, and the Board of County Commissioners picks a member, usually somebody who represents part of Minneapolis, as their member. And those 4 members of the MBC board hold the title and custody of this building, and then the county and the city both pay rent to MBC. So, for example, the security desk here and the officers at the security desk are employees of the MBC, not of the city, not of the county. The janitors who clean and look after the building, the designers, the engineers who maintain the building are employees of MBC, not of the city or of the county. It's a unique arrangement. One of the first things we studied when I first came in 2010 was, are there any other cities or counties that are structured like this, where a separate third entity owns the building that we call home? And the answer was no. We are unique in that way. Yeah. Highly inefficient, but it's how it's done. I wanted to start here because this building is beautiful and it happens to host or hold one of my favorite features of the building. I mentioned there's symbolism throughout. Because this was both Hennepin County and the city of Minneapolis, you'll find if you look to the very top of the skylight, it's probably hard to see from here, but in the east-west corners, which are this way and this way, are H's within the diamond points that make up the central diamond. The separate diamonds, you'll see an H. And in the crown corner, east, north and south, you'll see an M. So Minneapolis, Hennepin County. And then some of the oldest doorways here will have an M and an H overlaid across each other, representing the marriage of Hennepin County and Minneapolis together. You'll also see at the pillars that are right below on that 5th floor, do you see at the bottom it looks like a squiggle? That's a serpent or a dragon, which symbolically stands for wisdom, might, and wisdom. Above it, you'll see there's a lion's head at the bottom of the pillar from the top floor. Sticking out at the bottom of the pillar is a lion's head for power and strength. So there are the lions and the serpents. And then if you look right below that in the corners, you'll see an owl, wisdom. So there's symbology throughout this rotunda space. The windows here and the skylight above originally were all facing the sunlight. The skylight now is artificially lit. And all of these that are bright green are lit from the sun, but these 6 over here and the triptych here in the middle, we have built behind there into the courtyard extra buildings. So when they first built this, there was room to spare. Room to spare. It was going to host us forever. By the 1950s, we kicked the county out, but not before we built into the courtyard. So there is room. The crime lab used to be right behind these windows. And so they are artificially lit, which is why they look a little bit different. The thing I really wanted to talk about was the triptych. And that's because if you come around here, you'll see it in full view. The 3 panels together. On our far left, you see the original seal of the state of Minnesota. On the far right, you see the seal of the city of Minneapolis. We'll see the city closer up on the 3rd floor. The thing I want to draw your attention to is the French motto at the top, en avant. Anyone? Forward, progress or forward. I took 6 years of French so that I could tell you that. En avant, meaning forward, becomes the motto or the logo of the city. The center panel, though, and this is the only place you'll see this center panel, is meant to be read like words, right? The characters stand for things. And what you see is a prince who's seated on a throne that is festooned with ribbons and bows and flowers and a canopy. He holds in his hand on our right the sword of justice, and in his left, or on our left, in his hand is the book of the law. The 2 maiden figures in front of him seated on the steps, the one on our right is holding, it's hard to tell, but that's a beehive or a honeycomb. And you see bees buzzing around it. Symbolically, beehives, honeycombs, and bees themselves represent community, hard work and community. The female figure on our left is holding both a torch, a lit torch, and an olive branch. So who here can guess what an olive branch might mean symbolically? Peace, correct, right? So you read this saying, we are a peaceful community under law and justice, right? So from a symbolical standpoint, that's one of my favorite parts about this entryway is that stained glass picture right there in the middle and the meaning of Minneapolis being a peaceful community under law and justice. It's one that often gets overlooked because of this big fella, the Father of Waters. The Father of Waters actually named officially Mississippi. He represents the Mississippi River, which gave birth to the city of Minneapolis because of the mills along the falls. And so this was actually commissioned by the city of New Orleans at the very end of the river, not here at the beginning, which also explains why there's an alligator, right? Because we don't have those here. They do down south. Commissioned by the fathers of New Orleans in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right as this building was opening up. And the fathers of the city at the time, along with our major paper, the Minneapolis Journal, knew about this coming, and New Orleans was broke and couldn't afford to pay the artist. So they went south, they snagged it, and they brought it here and placed it here. And so it came north instead of south, but it was commissioned by the city of New Orleans, captured by the city of Minneapolis, rightfully so. And so the Mississippi, or also known as the Father of Waters, lives here. He has a pilot wheel that he sits against. There's a pilot wheel navigating the river. He has the nets, right, fishing. The alligator, there's a tortoise or a turtle here, and then of course the corn for agriculture, which also you could say is what made the mills great here. Milling and farming, which was originally what brought the settlers here from Fort Snelling, which was the original white settlement here as the land was developed. I'll also mention that ties into the en avant. Unlike most of the United States, which had early English settling, Minneapolis, Minnesota, I should say as a state, were the French fur traders from Canada coming south. And so that's why the French influence here versus English. I have a little cheat sheet, as I said. I'm going to make sure I covered everything about the building before I take us upstairs. I mentioned that this is the municipal building and courthouse. If you've ever wondered about the architectural style of the courthouse, both exterior and interior, it's called Richardsonian Romanesque. Richardsonian Romanesque is really a combination of 18th century Italian, French, and Spanish design. So you'll see small squat columns like you see around the triptych. You'll see the capital designs are very artistic and flourished with the ball. This is called an egg and dart design here at the bottom. And then at the top of the capital, you see the acanthus leaves, right, that fold over. Lots of columns and colonnades are part of this style. So you see the big columns, both interior and exterior, and the doors that have the 3 entrances in one column. So Richardsonian Romanesque. The groundbreaking for this building was in 1889. So right before the turn of the century. It was 19 years to construct the building. Was completed in 1906. I mentioned this was the county courthouse and the city hall. They've recently, with the last remodel, started to change this, but because we're on a north-south axis, the west side of the building, where we're going to go, has always been the city. This was the city hall, and the east side was the county courthouse. And so the courtrooms were on the east side, the judges, the Board of County Commissioners, the county auditor, the county treasurer were on this side of the building, the city council, the mayor, and its functions were on the west. And so it used to be that the odd numbers were on the west and the even numbers were on the east, on the right of the building. So you'd come into City Hall and you'd say, I'm looking for this number of a room, and based on the odd or even, you'd know if you were city or county. Today, the only things that are county left in this building are the sheriff's office, headquartered over here on the ground floor on the east side of the building, and it wraps around that entire side. So the entire east side of the ground floor is the sheriff's headquarters, and then the jail, which is on the top floor, and was from the beginning of time. The jail was on the top floor of City Hall. And it continues to be a jail that the sheriff controls. We also have a whole new correctional facility next door that was built by the county. It was built in a modular design so that over time it could be added on. We, the city people, I won't speak for Councilmember Schaefer, but we, the people of the city who have been a little bit more invested in taking over the whole space, have said, why can't you add another module and get the jail off the top floor? We have expanded. That conversation has never gone anywhere, and so they keep the jail on the top floor. I think that's all I wanted to cover here. Are there questions about the rotunda? No? All right, well, let's head up to the council chamber. So this is the third floor. It's at least worth a peek, I think, over the edge just to look back on where we were from. The marble for the floors, as you mentioned, and I think I said to you, all of the marble on the outside of the building from Ortonville, Ohio. Yeah, so beautiful space. We do a lot of big ceremonies here. You can see weddings take place here, reunions. We do the inauguration ceremony of mayor and council here mostly. Also in the year where marriage equality passed, Mayor Ryback at the time, starting at midnight, did a marathon number of weddings here at the grand staircase, and it was fun to be part of that historical event as well. So we'll head this way. This is where City Council has been from the beginning. So as I mentioned, the west side or odd numbers of the building were the city, and the third floor was always the City Council. And in fact, as they do today, the council takes up the entire west third floor of the building. That's how it was when the building opened. The council was the entire third floor. Over the years, it sort of changed. This is a new remodel that just ended last year. We moved back in. For those of you who may have come to see the council before, you'll see the damage to the tiles here. This used to be a glass wall, and this is where the council receptionist sat. And so you'd come in here to see the council receptionist, and then this was the door into council. We've remodeled and gone back to the early days where the mayor's office used to be on the other side, on the south side of the third floor. So council was kind of cramped into the northwest corner here. The council has now taken back the entire third floor, moved the mayor off. Part of that was, as I mentioned, historically, the mayor was never on the third floor. The mayor's original office was on the first floor on the south side, which is why, remember, 350 5th Street is our main address, because that's where the mayor's office was. So we've moved the mayor out, and the council has taken back its floor as it has been historically. However, when we get to chamber, I'll also mention this, and maybe as we walk, today, the council members all have offices. So you'll hear us talk about a ward office. Councilmember Schaefer has her own office where she and her staff have desks. They meet with constituents, conduct their business, and represent the ward. Originally, council members did not have personal offices. There was the main chamber, which has always been in the location it is today. The chamber has been there since the day this opened. But there were no private offices for council members. Instead, The rest of this floor had committee rooms, much like a state legislature. And so the Ways and Means Committee had its own smaller chamber. Land Use and Zoning had its own chamber. And so there were a series of committee rooms that surrounded the main chamber. As part of our most recent, which was the last year and a half, we opened up this space in order to provide an atrium outside of the chamber. This wall is new. It wasn't here. This grand staircase, when the building was opened, was the way you would have come up to see the council originally. You would have come up this grand staircase and exited here. For years, it was covered behind false walls that made for an interesting zigzag approach into the chamber. We've opened it back up with the glass looking out over the interior courtyard. I mentioned when we were downstairs that courtyard has had buildings in it. If you look now, you can see straight across from us where some of that new building covers the windows. So you look back to the arched windows, that's the rotunda, and you can see that those 3 floors over there were built in and covered up part of that wall. Directly across from us now is the Office of Public Service. It used to be called the Coordinator's Office, but it's the Office of Public Service. Margaret Anderson Kelleher, who is the city's operations officer. Originally, that was the city's crime lab. And then the 2 floors below it were county floors. So you'll see we have a water cistern. We collect water from the rooftop here. And then we have our green roof. This is native and wild grasses and plants and flowers. And you'll see we have 2, I don't think they're called beehives, but there are 2 units for bees that are on our green roof. So our health department maintains the beehives and they tend to the green roof. Last year, as part of the renovation, they opened up access to the courtyard. So at the top of the grand staircase, there's a door and you can go out now and enjoy the courtyard. It was sealed off for years because there wasn't appropriate access. The city seal, you can see it a little bit more in close up here. I'll give it a little quick description. The seal of the city of Minneapolis, you can see en avant at the top, again, French, forward or progress. The seal was approved in 1878. And what you see is the falls on the Mississippi coming down. And then in the foreground, you see the implements that made Minneapolis what it was. So there's the pilot wheel. Remember I talked about the pilot wheel being also on the Mississippi, or father of waters. You see a stack of lumber. You see the flour mills. You see the wheat. So the things that made the city great. And then in the background, you see the first suspended bridge over the Mississippi. You see the progress of development. You see smokestacks as businesses are building and manufacturing plants in the background. And so the city seal. Go through this door to get to the chamber. Yeah, go ahead.
Why the glass? Why not just leave it open?
Safety. Yeah. It's also why they reconstructed. So they've done a really great job. They've hired artisans. This railway that goes all around this staircase was not here. And so the original railings that are on the staircase, they had an artisan come in and reproduce them. They took a casting and then they reproduced all of these so that they matched the historic railings going up and down the stairwell. They took a lot of time and effort to do it right. I'm going to badge us in through this doorway here. This goes directly into the chamber. So the council chamber, this is the entryway to the chamber. As I said, the chamber has always been in this space. It has always occupied the 3rd floor center space on the west side of the building. When the council was first here and moved in, the ceiling went all the way up to the top of the 5th floor. And there were no seats for the public here. Remember, there were no offices for council members. They had desks on the floor, just like a state legislature. And the public sat in galleries that are right above the ceiling. I have some packets that I want to hand you so you can look at something other than me, and it will be some pictures that might be of interest to you. And so when the chamber first opened, as I said, the public sat above in galleries. So this was a 3.5-story room. The public sat above. There's a picture inside there in the PowerPoint slide. If you look at it, you'll see a black and white photo of the chamber. You'll see the arched ceiling from the original days. The ceiling wasn't flat like this, it arched. And between those arches and columns is where the public sat in very steep rows, and they could look down on the council and watch the proceedings. Each council member had a desk here on the floor, because remember, they didn't have offices. And then there was a small rostrum, probably from about this point to this point. So it wasn't the whole dais like it is today. That's where the council president and the clerk and some of the officers would sit and preside over the meetings. The murals, these are not the original murals. They are reproductions of the original murals. You'll see that they show the Mississippi River. Here on the south side is the undeveloped, right? So this is before settlement. You see Spirit Island floating in the middle. You see the Great Falls coming off the river. And then as you look to the north, you see development with the mills coming in to start taming the wild Mississippi and bringing Minneapolis to life here on the shores of the Great River. Also, when they opened this building in the early 1900s, at that time there were 13 wards. The city originally had 4 wards with 3 members per ward. And then they switched that to 13 wards as the city grew, and there were 2 council members per ward. So we had a council of, 26 members, and they all sat here on the floor, as I mentioned. It wasn't until the mid-1950s, I think 1951, when they reduced the council from 26 members, 2 per ward, to 1 per ward. So our 13-member council started in the 1950s, and at that time they also changed the title from alderman to council member. Alderman being thought to be a little bit prosaic, a little old-fashioned, and also sexist. So they changed the title officially to council member. Back in the day, too, council members were elected to 2-year terms. Our council just came off back-to-back 2-year terms, and that was hellish at best, and have gone to 4. But in the early days, elections were for 2-year terms. So there was a lot of churn and burn in the council. I mentioned that in the remodel, we've taken back over the whole 3rd floor. When I first came here in 2010 as city clerk, beyond this wall was the mayor's office, and all of the council was on this side. And symbolically, at least, even though we were crowded in on this side of the building, it really reflected the fact that the chamber was the middle space, the neutral space where the mayor and council came together as the governing body of the city. So if you think about the council being a legislative body, right? Our charter says the council is a legislative body. It says the mayor is the CEO or chief executive. But every city in the United States and every city in Minnesota is structured to have what's called a governing body. And the governing body is the mayor and the council together. So from me as an institutionalist, I like to remind people this is where the governing body comes together to do its work as a governing body. So you see the far seat over there is reserved for the mayor, who has a seat in council but is not a member of the body, doesn't have a vote and doesn't get to participate in their proceedings, but does have a right to speak to the council. You'll see these nameplates are empty right now. We change them for each committee meeting that happens. In the 1990s, this room was remodeled because in the 50s, when we decided to modernize this beautiful space, they did a true architectural sin. They covered all of the marble wainscot and the painting and the stenciling and the plaster with fake wood, right, paneling, and they put a false skylight, a dome, in that was lit from above, a dome, and it would catch bugs above the dome. And so you'd see dead bug carcasses above it. And they oriented this entire chamber this way. And so they had a series of tables set up in a U where the council would sit on this end, and then they had the benches facing them this way. That remained in place from the 50s till about the late 90s. And a lot of historians said this chamber used to be beautiful. And they saw pictures of it and they said, why did they do this to the chamber? And so through a lot of effort by historians and architecture, people who like historic preservation, they spent a lot of money to return the chamber to not its original state, otherwise we would have had the public galleries above, but to its 1923. So about 1923, this is what it would have looked like, except for this. Remember, they still would have had desks in front. So the big change is they brought back an artist to reimagine the frescoes. The frescoes were damaged in the 50s. And so these are not the original frescoes. They are reproductions, faithfully restored to the original. They brought in artisans who recreated the porcelain moldings. They also were damaged. They had to go find light fixtures from that time period, the colorings, everything else to match what it would have looked like in 1923. And then because we don't have the public galleries, putting the public gallery here meant putting all of the council members at a larger dais at the front. At that time, too, they also modernized by putting the cameras in and the lights. So this is somewhat of a production center. You know that our meetings are broadcast. And so there are production lights, production cameras, things of that nature, the TVs for the feedback, and then, of course, here at the podium, all of the technical equipment that allows people to present to the mayor and council when they're here, but to council and council committees It's a beautiful space. I'm happy to answer any questions about the space if I can. Otherwise, I'm going to then end my presentation talking about sort of how council operates.
I have one question.
Sure.
So, like, it looks like there's empty, like, sort of frames. Was there originally artwork in those, or they've always just kind of been?
Nope, that's just a decorative design of the molding. There's only ever been the 2 murals within the space. And again, these aren't the originals, they are reproductions. But those are just sort of wall decor around the area.
How old is the seal behind you? Is that just made so old, or is it actually?
It's actually quite old. I would guess there was a series of seals made. Those are very heavy plaster that have been painted in this copper color. That one has faded over time. I happen to have one that's boxed up in my office. I haven't pulled out since we've returned. The CFO has one. There might be another one floating around. This one, Council President Alice Rainville had, and when she left the council, it disappeared. And then when we restored the chamber and brought it back to its 1923 look, she donated the seal back to the council chamber, so the seal would be here. This is the city's flag. Have you ever seen the city flag? I will unfurl it for you, and then I'll let it fall again, because it's quite ugly. It's quite ugly. There was a competition that Mayor, I believe, I could be wrong on this, so don't quote me, but I believe Mayor Naftalin at the time led the competition and wanted a city flag. And so they did a design, and you can see the 4 symbols here. There's a microscope, a compass, a government building, and the pilot wheel. Probably by now we all understand what the pilot wheel is for, the river, the influence of the river. The scientific microscope was to represent education, higher education, learning. The compass, I'm not for sure what, and the government building, of course, government. The artist is still alive. She lives in Ward 13. She was, I think, in grade school who designed it and won the competition. There are some theories that this is not the flag she designed and submitted, that the mayor didn't like what she did and decided he would personally add some artistic touches. My understanding, nowhere do I find this confirmed, but this is what I understand to be true, and I've said to you, Councilmember, all clerks are frustrated historians. So the design was originally the white flag with a blue pennant. And the mayor said that's not enough and added the 4 symbols. It was adopted officially by the council, so that's the official flag, as was the seal early on, adopted by the council as the seal of the city. So it's the city flag. Yeah.
What was the year again? What was the year?
Of the flag?
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact year. It was sort of like in the
70 years ago?
60s, 70s is when it was done.
Oh.
Wasn't that long ago. There have been at least, again, I came in 2010, and I think I've had to talk 8 council members out of doing a new flag. There's a recurring desire to do a new flag, and I always kind of quash that, especially after the controversy with the state flag. I said, there's a lot of things going on in Minneapolis right now. I'm not sure we want to take on the flag. Obviously, it's not my decision, but I try and discourage that, knowing what it will require us to go through to adopt a flag. So even though I would tell you I don't think the flag is very attractive, it is our flag. The windows were covered when we first started broadcasting with a disgusting green film that always made it look like there was a tornado outside the building. And so one of the things I asked for is that was because cameras in the day were very sensitive to light. They're not as sensitive now. They're very, advanced. And so they took the green film off of the windows now. So there you can see out, it's broad daylight, and it looks a lot better.
I know you're going to take us through a little bit of the legislative process, but in that, can you just speak to what you enjoy about your job and what some of the challenges of your job are?
I will, but can I take this question back here?
Yes, absolutely.
Since that's about me and this won't probably be.
Basketball games.
Correct, because when we closed the public galleries, I mentioned there's a jail on the top floor. One of the things they did was to connect the whole floor. So the jail was originally mostly on that side, but there was no place for people in the jail to exercise. And there had been some landmark cases, early in the 1900s, that even if a prisoner is in jail, they have certain rights to exercise, to get out and move. But we didn't have any place to do that. And so when they closed this off, there became a huge space. Look how big this space is. And so there is a gym. I won't call it a basketball court, right above us. It does have a hard floor. It happens to have some basketball goals above it. But sometimes they'll put up a net and play volleyball. Sometimes they just race. It's a place to get out and walk, stretch your legs, move about. We have to schedule council and committee meetings very closely with the MBC, and they act as our coordinating point because the jail is held by the sheriff, a county elected official. This building is owned by the MBC, and then we're the city council. And so we have to tell them when council committee meetings are so they can make sure nobody's dribbling the ball above us. Despite our best efforts, every now and then it's always fun when you walk in here and you start hearing the ball dribbling up there, and you'll see the clerks over here in the corner madly scrambling to get the notice out. We're in a meeting, stop the dribbling. And so that happens occasionally. We don't like it when it does, though. Anything else?
That would be unique among major cities in America.
For sure unique. For sure. There's a jail right above our council chamber. Yeah, so you asked the question about what I enjoy about my job. So I came for this job. I applied for this job in 2009. I got the job in 2010. It was a year-long process, very, very long. In fact, from the date I applied to when they first called me for an interview, I think 9 months had passed. When they called me, I said, gosh, did the person you hire quit? What happened? It took a long time for me to ultimately get the job in August of 2010, August 2, my first day of 2010. I had been the county clerk in Johnson County, Kansas before I came here. Johnson County is, I would say, the equivalent of Hennepin County in the state of Kansas. It's most populated. I had the interesting ability of becoming the first appointed city clerk, or county clerk, in Johnson County when I was 24. So very, very young. I became the first and only appointed county clerk in the state of Kansas. I had the experience of working for a woman. I got my start as an aide to a county commissioner who was very ambitious and very smart. And she said, Johnson County is growing. We have, I can't remember, I think 20 some cities within the county, and they were growing. We grew as a county 12 to 15,000 people per year. So dealing with annexations and incorporations of new cities was a big function of the board. The Johnson County area is the southwest quadrant of the Kansas City metro. So if you think of the KC metro area, Johnson County is the southwest corner. It's where a lot of business headquarters are located. CEOs want to live there. They're known for top quality schools. And so as the county was developing, the woman I worked for, a woman named Annabeth Serbaugh, said, the county is an archaic form of government and it's not responsive enough to growth. We should be more like a city. And so she lobbied the state legislature, and they created a charter commission for Johnson County specifically of 25 members, a 25-member charter commission. It included representation from the state GOP, the state Democrat Party, the local parties at the county level, League of Women Voters, other good government types, and just general citizens. And they met for a period of a year and a half and developed a county charter, like a city charter for the county, put it on the ballot, and it passed. I, being the son of an elected official and also a frustrated historian, as I mentioned earlier, had been working for her, and I said, this is historic. This is once in a lifetime. And so I volunteered to staff the Charter Commission at night for free because I thought it was so fun. And so I was the staff to that first Charter Commission. They passed the charter. It passed at the ballot. It reformed the county government to be a little bit more like a city. It expanded the board by membership to 7 commissioners who are elected by district, and one of them was elected from the entire county, like a mayor. And she served as the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, responsible to all of the county, not just one of the districts. And my commissioner that I worked for, who was very ambitious and went and got the legislation, was the first elected countywide chairman. As part of that, we eliminated 3 elected offices. The county treasurer, the county recorder of deeds, and the county clerk had been elected. And those were consolidated in the professional bureaucracy of the administration under a county manager. And I then became the first county clerk appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. Did that job for about 14 years. And then I knew I wanted to stay in local government. I fell into being a clerk. Believe me, nobody says, I want to be a clerk when I grow up. Nobody even knows what that is. But I fell into it, and I realized I really, really like this. I like it a lot. I think I'm pretty good at it. I want to stay at it. But I'd like to do a city because I've done a county now. And so I started looking for cities. My eye landed on Minneapolis, and the job opened, and then nothing happened. And then it opened up a few years later in 2009, as I mentioned, and I applied. And the day that I applied, I remember calling the HR department saying, hey, I want that job. What's it going to take? And they were like, well, we don't even know yet. The council hasn't made up their mind. And so a year later, as I mentioned, on June 1st, coming up, the anniversary, June 1st being Marilyn Monroe's birthday, that's how I remember that, I got a call from a woman named Barbara Johnson saying, hey, would you like to be the next city clerk? And I said, oof, I would like to think about that for the weekend, if you will, because it was a Friday. And of course, I was like, yes, I want that job, but I'm gonna act professional and take the weekend. And I did. And I took the job, and I gave a 2-month notice at Johnson County, and during that 2 months would come up here to Minneapolis and transition. What do I enjoy most about my job? My job, one of the reasons I wanted Minneapolis is the clerk here runs elections, and that's not common. Most elections are run at the county level. Very, very, very rare to have a city be in charge of elections the way we are, and as much as we are. And that was very important to me. And I thought, government begins at the ballot box, and I want to have that in my repertoire. So having elections was important to me. The other thing is the Minneapolis City Clerk is unusually strong. The clerk profession gave birth to the profession of city managers or city administrators. Before you had people go to school and get a master's degree to become a city manager, you had clerks. And the clerks were the city managers. And they ran HR, and they ran the budget, and they ran the central administration. And then somewhere along the lines they said, these clerks, who are they? We need managers. And so they created the profession of city managers, and city clerks were largely relegated to being the secretary of the city manager and keeping minutes at council meetings. The Minneapolis City Clerk, I mentioned, some of you may have heard my predecessor, Lyle Schwarzkopf, who sort of really put his stamp on what the clerk is here in Minneapolis. The position here is very strong. Is the head of the legislative department, runs elections, runs the council's legislative process, is in charge of all of the city's information assets, is the custodian of its records, the keeper of its seal, and the certifier of all of the official acts of the city as a corporation. And gets to work with one of the largest in the state of Minnesota, certainly, one of the largest in the nation's full-time city councils. All of that has appealed to me, is also what continues to make me think that this job is unique and different and special, and no 2 days are alike. So that's my answer to that one. Legislative process? Legislative process, in your packets, I put together, there are 7 steps to enacting an ordinance. You all are going to make sure that I get it right in order. And I'm just going to sort of go through this at a general level. The council can do lots of things, but ordinance-making powers are its most awesome. And the reason I say that is because an ordinance is the equivalent, legally, of a state statute. So you should think of our ordinances, they're like our local laws. It's the most powerful act that the council can do. They also do policies and resolutions and other types of actions, but an ordinance is its most important function. It's how we create local laws for the city that govern the city and also regulate the city enterprise in terms of how it operates as a municipal corporation. So to do an ordinance, you have to have a council member be an author or a sponsor. No ordinance can come forward until at least one member agrees to sponsor it. Council members themselves often are the source of inspiration for an ordinance, or in working with their constituents and working with community groups, neighborhood associations, the business sector, working with the administration. Our administration has 25 different departments, and because they deliver services each and every day, they often know how to make improvements to the ordinances we have in place. So no matter where the idea comes from, this is sort of like how a bill becomes a law at the state legislature. No matter where the bill comes from, it's got to be authored by a council member. And the council member starts that process by giving notice of their intent to introduce the ordinance at a council meeting. So our council works just like a state legislature. They're the only full-time council in the state, and they operate through a system of standing committees, just like the state legislature. In this regard, our city council is not like other councils in the state of Minnesota. In the state of Minnesota, city councils are inevitably part-time. They usually don't have standing committees. They don't meet during the day, and they usually meet at night, and the city manager has packaged the agenda for them, and it's really kind of a pro forma vote. You come in, and your most important duties in the other cities are the budget each year and the appointment of the city manager. Because once you appoint that city manager, they're in charge. They supervise all the departments. They hire all the departments. They fire all the departments. Nobody reports to the council but the manager. So the selection and supervision of that manager and the approval of the budget is their major function. Here, The council doesn't supervise the departments per se, but they do provide oversight. And we are the largest city, and we provide services to 430,000+ residents on a daily basis. And when you add in the people who commute in and out and who visit and want to work and recreate and play here, we're the largest metro area outside of Chicago in the Midwest. So governance here is very important. And I will maintain that what we do in this chamber as a council doesn't just affect us, the city, it affects the Twin Cities Metro, and by extension, the state of Minnesota, and by extension, the upper Midwest. So, I think people can downplay the role of council. I like to upplay the role of council. What we do here has consequence and matters, and it all starts with that notice of intent to bring forward an ordinance. That tells the community, it tells the other policymakers, it tells the staff in the departments and the news media, hey, I'm about ready to open up this book of local laws, and I'm about ready to make a change in this title, in this chapter, by doing a new section, an old section, a new revision, whatever it is. That notice is simply giving people a heads up. At the very next council meeting, which is usually 2 weeks later, we do 3 steps in one. Officially, we'd call it an introduction. And we introduce the ordinance officially. We give it its first of 2 required readings. Every ordinance has to have 2 readings, and we refer it to the standing committee that has subject matter jurisdiction. So, introduction, first reading, and referral to committee. And they do that with the first vote. The first vote on every ordinance is that 3-step process. And that gets the idea of the ordinance in front of one of the standing committees. Council has committees, and they change over the years, but largely those committees are put around what I'll call spheres of municipal policy. So we have a committee around public health, safety, and equity. And the things that the city does in terms of delivering programs, priorities, policies, and services that relate to that sphere of government report up through the council to that committee. So that committee then will take that draft idea for an ordinance, and they'll review it. They'll conduct a public hearing where the community gets to stand right here and say, here's what I like about your idea. Here's what I don't like about your idea. Here's what would make your idea better. We get that public input directly through the committee. The staff, the professional staff, will stand here and say, here's how that'll affect our operations. Here's the fiscal impact on the city. Here's the impact on the community and how the community will experience this new change in programs, priorities, or policies. Based on all of that feedback, the council then, the committee, will make a recommendation and vote to send it back to council. That recommendation might be approve it as it is, or with lots of changes and amendments and substitutions and rearrangements based on all the feedback we've gotten. Here's the version we want to submit to council. Or they could say, don't do it. This is a bad idea. Kill it. Or often the committee will say, we don't know. We are at an impasse as a committee, and we can't make up our minds, so we're going to refer it, what they call without recommendation, back to the full council. Hint, whenever you hear them say without recommendation, as the clerk here for 16 years, I can tell you, we're about to have a lot of fun at the council meeting, because that means there's not agreement. There's not any kind of consensus even. It probably means we're in for a fight at council, and it probably means we're going to get referred back, because we don't like doing committee work at the full council. After it comes out of committee, it's going to go to the full council, and the full council, by the appropriate vote that's required by law, can either further perfect, I call it perfect, amend the ordinance as it came out of committee. They can continue to amend it, continue to refine it, but once they get it in a final form, they're going to vote on it. Most ordinances are going to pass with 7 affirmative votes. That's the minimum. The charter requires what they call the absolute majority vote. The absolute majority vote means an absolute majority of the body. And there are 13 seats on the body, so an absolute majority of 13 is 7. An ordinance and a resolution require at least 7 votes to pass. If it gets to 7 votes or more, that is an ordinance that has been adopted by council and is referred then to the mayor. The mayor, as the other half of the governing body, as the CEO, gets to consider the ordinance and every act of council. The mayor has 3 options. The mayor can say, I approve your act, and authenticate it by signature. The mayor can say, I really don't like this idea, but I'm not going to oppose it, and return it to the clerk without signature. We call that deemed approved. In either case, what the council did gets passed and becomes effective. Or, the third choice, the mayor could veto it. We all know what a veto is. That's the executive. Veto is Latin for I forbid. I forbid that, I send it back. And it comes back through the clerk, and then the council at their next meeting can, if they can get 2/3 votes, meaning 9 affirmative votes, they can override the mayor's veto and pass their original act, notwithstanding the veto. So that's the basic legislative process in a nutshell. After the council takes its final action, either in overriding the mayor or with the mayor's approval, it has to be published in the city's official newspaper. Our official newspaper is Finance and Commerce. When it's published in the paper, it becomes effective. It can't become effective before publication. That goes back to ancient days where you cannot enact laws without the people subject to them knowing. So even though very few people may have a subscription to Finance and Commerce, once we publish it in Finance and Commerce, we say it's good. It's good to go. It's legally effective. And then it comes back to the clerk, and the clerk codifies it. Codifying meaning we're taking that ordinance as a single slip law. We call it a slip law. It's a single piece of paper. And we put it in the book of laws, which is the code of ordinances under the correct title, the correct chapter, and the correct section. So those are the 7 steps to enacting an ordinance or a local law in a nutshell. As with all things, when you create this sort of how a bill becomes a law, it seems a lot clearer and a lot more straightforward, like a linear process. In reality, it's sort of like popcorn, and it can bubble up over here, and it can bubble up over there. The through point for us, though, is we always want to make sure the public knows where it's at. And so public notice becomes very important. That's why that notice at the beginning of the process, all of our agendas that track where that item might be have to be posted to the public for access at least 2 business days before each meeting. All of our meetings are open to the public. That calendar is adopted. We've adopted the calendar for the next 4 years. So you can look out 2 years from now and find out when our meetings are going to be. They're always open to the public. They're broadcast both on local TV, but also on the website. So we do a lot in terms of public access, and I will say that Minneapolis goes far away and above of what the state law requires for access. State law requires, as an example, that we have one agenda posted available over there on that table for the public to look at. It doesn't have to be available to the public before the meeting. It has to be available at the meeting, during the meeting, and I only have to produce one. We don't even have to have an agenda. If we choose to have an agenda, then you have to have one available in the room. So the fact that we produce multiple copies of the agenda, we post it 2 days before, we make it available, we broadcast our meetings, the things that Minneapolis does to make our process as a council, our legislative process, accessible and known to the public are quite extensive. And that's something I'm very proud of. I didn't create it. I have been an inheritor of that process and have tried during my tenure to both increase and improve and tweak it here and there. But that's a process I think that the city should be proud of, how open we are. In fact, one of the things that drew me to the city of Minneapolis, harkening back to that question, was Minneapolis has a reputation for being quite open and for having high, above average levels of civic engagement. And you see that both at our elections, and you see that at our public hearings, and you see it on applications for our boards and commissions. So all of those things are things I touch. So I know that the constituency, the community here in Minneapolis is highly engaged, and that process is very important to them. They feel very connected to their council members. I've done a lot of talking, yeah.
How are budgetary matters similar or different from this flow?
Very similar. They're a little bit different in that the budget is not done by ordinance, it's done by resolution under state law. So it's a different vehicle, but the process of notice and public hearings and the committee work and everything else is pretty much the same.
And if an ordinance has budgetary implications, that arises through the staff research and then debate.
Correct. So every item, ordinance is included, but every item, when you look at our agenda packet, has a series of reports, if you will, and the most important report we call an RCA. It's a request for committee action. Usually they're generated by staff, and I call it a briefing memo. In a very structured way, it says who, what, when, where, why, how, and how much. Should answer those 7 questions like a journalist. Who, what, when, where, why, how much. Is this issue that you're proposing going to be? And so there's a fiscal note attached if there is a fiscal impact. There's also a race equity impact analysis. That's a big word, RIA, we call it. So if there is an impact on communities of color, we want to know about it in this city. And so there's an analysis that can go into that, all kinds of supporting documentation, maps, drawings, renderings, public correspondence, all goes into the file. And so every agenda item is a file in the clerk's system. And so that's why we track on those LIMS file numbers, is everything goes into a file number. The last thing I want to say, because I know you want to talk about this a little bit too, Councilmember, is on the last slide of that handout I gave you are a list of some resources LIMS being our biggest one, lims.minneapolismn.gov. That is our online information portal for everything that's coming to and from the council and its committees, as well as all of our appointed boards and commissions. We have about 50 boards and commissions. And so all of our public meetings, you could say, are through that LIMS portal. There's a calendar application where you can find out when are the meetings happening. If you click on the meeting, it'll tell you where, what time, when it starts, who's available. The agenda is linked from there, and through the agenda you get links to all of the agenda items. So we're very proud of LIMS, which started in 2017, and we went back in time to 2014, and we've added from there back in time. The other thing I gave you, another handout's called Tracking City Council, and on that document I've tried to give you all of the online resources where you can go look up, clear back in time, where to find old ordinances, old minutes, old proceedings, old petition files. And so hopefully those handouts are helpful to you as you monitor and track the City Council. I've had a fabulous time talking. I told you I would talk the whole time.
No, I just want to, I think we need to give First Clerk Carl a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks.
I really appreciate your time.
Sure.
And it means a lot for us to have this inside scoop.
Sure.
So if people still, since we're a small crowd, and they're getting ready to start actually a committee meeting at 1:30, if you have another 5 minutes, we're going to go that direction down the hallway and check out the Ward 7 office. And I'll just give you a little bit more information at that point, and we'll call it a wrap. But thank you.
Before
so
you
much.
did, you wanted to talk about your introducing your process, your work with the legislative process.
Yeah, I mean, Clerk Carl, just sent him an email today. I put forward my very first notice of intent to submit an ordinance change this morning. So next Thursday will be kind of the time that I will bring forward this ordinance change. I have 7 of my colleagues that are on board with me in co-authoring this, but this will be looking at data centers. And we know that that has been an issue cropping up in our city, looking at data center regulation and kind of a time frame and work plan for how we're going to do that work in the next probably 6 months, something like that. So I'm excited about that. And I think it's going to generate a lot of great discussion and education amongst the citizens of Minneapolis. So let's go check out the Ward 7 office. All righty, here we go.
Turned around. Is this the right way?
Yes, it is. I'm keeping you straight. This actually, if you were to come to visit any of the council members, this is the main greeting area, main office. All right, let's head this way. Councilmember Sorensen, here's Councilmember Chavez. Come on in, everybody. This is our space. It's very functional. It's brand new. We love it. You can take, I have 2 aides, Dave and Marty. Anybody want to take a guess on whose desk is whose?
Without looking at nameplates.
Oh,
Oh. I'm going to say this one's Marty.
no.
Well, I will. We're wrong.
Really?
This is mine, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, this is the creative work in process right
Yes.
here.
You know, a messy.
And, we're really proud of, our Minnesota flag, our show Uptown. And of course, if you're wondering Eric, I don't know if you knew the boundaries of Ward 7, but we keep this front and center because it helps us, really keep in mind that we're not just one neighborhood. We're not just one pocket. We have a very diverse constituency. And then this is, back here is my Ward 7 art, Taylor. You can see the 7 pools.
Oh,
My neighbor actually did that artwork, and she submitted it for the Parks Foundation. Has an art contest every year where they do posters in the park down at
I've never been there
Nokomis.
before.
Yeah, it's really fun. And so then the artists get a little spiff, and then the Parks Foundation gets a little spiff. But that's Thomas Lowry Park. So this is where we hang out. We spend a lot of time, and we call this, if I'm not in here, sometimes Dave or Marty will use this as the phone booth.
This is
We
the
can,
phone
can
booth.
shut the door.
Phone booth.
Yes. Well, thank you all for coming, and we were a small but mighty crowd.